Welcome back, and thanks for joining me for part 2 of this video, where we will finish the Chapter 3 Excel Skill Review 3.2 with steps 11 through 23. We left off at step 10, so before we start into step 11, what I'd like you to do, freeze the video, just make sure that your screen looks like my screen. In fact, the last thing that we did is we finalized this formula for step S10 through. There were 3 warnings displayed. Make sure you're there, and if we haven't already, save that work. Now, let's continue on to step number 11. It says that in cell D4, we are going to use the max function. Well, max means maximum. Another way to look at this is the highest. So when we looked at the solution file, we know we were looking for the highest scores. So it says we're going to look at column D10 and we're going to find the max, and we're going to copy the formula across to row AB4. It says be sure to leave cell S4 blank. Well, what we might have to do is fill it in and then delete it, but let's just see how it goes. Let me move these instructions out of the way. We're going to click in cell D4. This is where they wanted the highest. So what this function is doing is it's going to look in D10 through D26. So how did the students do in this particular assignment, and what was the maximum score? So let's see, all formulas start with an equal sign, and I know this formula happens to be max, so I'm going to go ahead and type it. You see that the tooltip is coming up here to help me. It's already typed the word, it's already found the word max, or the function max. I'm going to make sure I type my open parenthesis. Now, drag from D10 all the way down to D26. If you make a mistake, not to worry, you can always enter this later. So, or correct it later. So I'm going to close my parenthesis and press enter. What I'm trying to say is, if I realized I made a mistake, you should have the answer 30. If you don't see 30, and if you click on that cell and your formula looks different, just come up here and click inside there. And then you could change that. If it was, for example, for D9, I could just change that to D9. Now, obviously, I don't want to do that. That's wrong. So let me come back up here and change that to D10. So if you make a mistake, just make sure you catch it so that your formula is correct. Now that we've got that formula in place, I'm going to select that cell, D4, and they want us to copy it across all the way over here to cell AB4, but they wanted us to leave this column blank because this is just where we've totaled some things, right? Well, we can always delete it. So let's just copy across because that's fast, and then we can delete the cell that's not supposed to have anything in it. So I'm using the autofill handle. I got my thin black plus sign. I did a drag all the way across, and now I'm releasing my mouse button. And it fills in very nicely. I know I don't want anything in S4, so select that and delete. Check, check. See how I'm checking? I'm clicking and I'm checking. If I'm in column H, I should be looking at column H in my function. L10 through 26. Now that should always be the same, 10 through 26, 10 through 26, but different letters of the alphabet because different columns. See how fast it is to check? That's what those advanced people in your office or on your future job or, you know, in your network of friends that you work with, maybe as an entrepreneur, this is how they're doing that. Save that work. That was step 11. Let's just verify. We use the max function. We went across to AB4. Scroll up just a little. On to step 12. Find the lowest score among all students for each assignment. So Before we were looking at the maximum or the highest score. Now we're looking for the lowest or the minimum score. So we're going to do basically the same type of calculation, but this time using min. So let's move those instructions out of the way. Cell D5, this is the low, oops, let me click here. Okay, I did not intend this, but this is perfect. I had clicked in that max function to talk about it, and I did not cancel out before I started clicking. So look what's happening. It's trying to add that stuff in, that information into my formula, which is a mistake. When you realize this, just come up here and cancel or hit the escape key on your keyboard. If I didn't notice that and it caused some kind of problem, as soon as I notice it, undo. I'm glad we caught that. What I'm trying to do is to click in cell D5, and I want to, again, I know this formula, and all formulas start with an equal sign. The function is min. See how it already found it? Open your parenthesis. Now I just drag from D10 once again to D26. Whoops. Once I get to the end, I can just press the enter key. It'll close that parenthesis for me. And there's my value, 15. Let me click inside of cell D5. Let me put my mouse over that autofill handle, get my powerful thin black plus sign, press, and I'm going to drag all the way across to AB5 and release. Then I'm going to remember to delete from the center column of S5, delete. And I'm going to look at my formulas, because look, now a lot of zeros. Does that make sense? Does it make sense that zeros would be the minimum score in these columns? It does. They don't ask us to do this, but imagine how informative it would be if you selected this whole range of cells. I'm going to do it, and then I'm going to undo it. I'm going to select the whole thing. What if I went up here, went to conditional formatting, and used something we learned in the last chapter, and I said if it's equal to 0, put that red highlight. Isn't that informative? And does it make sense? In almost every column, I have a 0, don't I? Now this one is kind of interesting to me. Oh yeah, I have a 0 there. I'm looking right at it. Isn't that interesting? And here I do not have any zeros, but when I look in these two columns, I don't see any red. Do you see how fast it is to find things that way? They did not tell us to do that, so what are we going to do? Control Z to get rid of that conditional formatting. But you can see how helpful that is. That looks good to me. I think we should save that. Let's go back to our instructions and verify. We were in cell D5, we used the min function, D10 through D26, and we copied the formula. On to step 13. We're going to calculate now the average score. Same process, this time using average. So let's move this across, and we're going to start in cell D6. All formulas start with an equal sign. The name of the function is average. As soon as I type AV, I don't want to type that whole word. I can just double click the word average. Notice all these powerful functions. Average with an A, average if, average ifs, so condition or multiple conditions. We're just doing a simple average. Notice it put the parenthesis in there. So I want to average from cell D10 all the way through D26. I'm going to press my enter key. I'm going to go back up here and select that cell. I'm going to move my mouse on top of that autofill handle, press and drag all the way across. See that division by 0? Yeah, because how does it take the average? It has to divide by something, and what is going on here, right? It can't do that. So that's an error, but we know why it happened, so we'll just delete that. We didn't want that anyway. Save. But probably click around and check. The columns, oops, I'm sorry, got off onto the wrong row. The columns are changing, the rows are not. That's exactly what I want to see. That looks correct to me. Again, save that work. Move this back over. So step 13, very fast. Look at us go. So step 14, they tell us to compute the total points for each student, and we're just simply going to use the sum function. We're going to start all the way in the first column, which is column D, and we're going to go all the way to the last column of assignments, which is AB. So we know how to enter these functions now. I'm going to click in cell AC10. I'm just going to start typing my function. All formulas start with an equal sign. Then I'm going to type my function. I'm going to open the parenthesis. I'm going to start. Make sure, folks, that you start even in this empty cell. All the way over here, D10. Now this is interesting because I'm even summing that if function, which when it returns warning, how do we add 1 plus warning? So very interesting, but I've got D10 through AB10. I'm just going to press my enter key and let Excel close that parenthesis. I click on that formula again, verify D10 through AB10, and then I can use my fill handle and double click. Now again, I do want to spot check to make sure D11 through AB11. So let me just, see if I click in there how it shows me what is selected. So that's another way, just make sure you cancel. Now, isn't that impressive? We didn't have to worry about this logical function adding into our formula at all. Now, we could have done two different ranges. We could have summed the first range, comma, and then the second range. So you could do that. But in this case, it handled it no problem. Let's save that. So did we complete step 14? I think so. On to step 15. Enter a formula to compute the percentage for the first student. So we're going to divide the student's total points by the total points possible. You'll be copying this formula, so make sure to use absolute references. That will get us every time. So let me move this formula, these instructions to the side. We're going to start in cell AD10. So how do you tabulate your grade? It's how many points did you earn over how many points were possible. If you could have earned 1,000 points this semester, if you earned 800 divided by 1,000, you have 80%. So that's all that we're doing. Here we go. So we're in cell AD10. All formulas start with an equal sign. My first cell is the one we just calculated. It's the sum of all the points that that particular student earned. We're going to divide by cell AC7. This is the total points possible. And that's a formula. That's sum. We looked at that earlier when we were displaying formulas. So AC10 divided by AC7. But we know we plan to copy that. And it's very common to go ahead and hit the enter key and copy the formula and forget. So if I make that mistake, okay, first formula looks good. And I come up here and I select that cell and I want to copy it. Folks, don't turn this in. This is where you will lose people's perception of integrity and being knowledgeable. You do have some errors, but can you also see that nobody's going to have 235%? They might have 106% if you had like a lot of bonus points or something, but 174%, really? So if you clicked on this and you're looking up here, you start to see what's happening. This is the error. It's no longer using this value of 504 points. Common problem. I'm going to hit the escape key on my keyboard. I did this because I want you to remember, where do you go to fix the problem? To fix the problem, you go back to one that you were going to copy. Don't start at this first one that has the error. Go back to the first cell because that's where you created the formula and there was a problem with that formula. We could even talk about these error messages and how we need to understand how to decode and troubleshoot these errors. We make errors, folks. It's knowing how to fix them. So when I click this cell and I come back up here to my formula bar, I'm going to click on AC7, anywhere on that cell. I'm going to move my mouse out of the way. Do you remember that the F4 key can be a shortcut way to do those absolute references? Now don't forget, on your keyboard, like mine, I have to hold down the FN or the function key before I press the key on the top of my keyboard for F4. And if I press that repeatedly, it changes the type of reference. It could be a hybrid reference with columns or rows locked, or it could go back to relative. What I'm looking for is $AC, $7. Also, as a reminder, if I bring my mouse back up here and click, if you can't get that F4 key to work, just type the $sign, but make sure you type it before the column and before the row, just like they have it in the instructions. Once you have that, press your Enter key. Now, the first formula is still accurate. It still displays the correct results, but now we can copy it with that absolute reference. So now, I just double-clicked. I got that powerful thin black plus sign over the fill handle. I double-clicked, which copied that. Now, as I look at these values, they make sense. How else could we have done that? What if we had clicked in cell AC7 and named it total? Or maybe we call it something like possible total. Something that makes sense, right? Then that would have been an absolute reference, and we wouldn't have had to worry about using those $signs if we had used an absolute reference to refer to cell AC7. Save that. Did we save that? Let's save that work. Let's look at these instructions. That was step 15. On to step 16. It says the grade scale is stored in the GradeScale worksheet. Remember we looked at that earlier? Before calculating students' final grades, create a named range to use in the formula. So notice that this is on the other worksheet, and it's going to be these cells, and we're going to just call it GradeScale. And remember, when we looked at the name earlier, when we name a range, that it includes the name of the worksheet. So let's move this over. I'm going to change to the GradeScale, and they want me to select B4 through C8. Folks, I want you to notice something. The sorting of this is lowest to highest, and the numbers are in the first column that we selected. So B4 through C8. Click in the name box. We're going to use that camel case that goes up and down, no spaces. GradeScale, press your Enter key. Now you can see when I click in this little drop-down box, I can see possible points. I can also see GradeScale. These are all part of my workbook, so they're all available. I'm going to press the Escape key on my keyboard. Well, that was easy peasy. We just named those cells because we're getting ready. We're planning this out. Make this a little bigger so we can see all these steps at one time. So on to step 17. It says now you're ready to create a lookup formula to display each student's final letter grade. So we're going to go back to our scores sheet and we're going to select cell AE10. Now I'm going to walk you through this, but let's just look that ultimately what we're doing is we're going to use a VLookUp formula, and Excel is going to help us fill in the values that we need. And they're giving us 3 values. They're telling us the cell that we're going to look up, they're telling us to go to this named range GradeScale and to return what's in the second column that we selected. So the letter grade. So let's do that. So I'm going to go to back to my scores worksheet, and I want to click in cell AE10. And in cell AE10, they say I'm going to go up here to this formulas ribbon because, that's all the tools that I need. And this time, we've looked at date, we've looked at text, we've looked at logical, and they want us to use lookup and reference. So that's right here, that's on the other side of date. And as we look through this, these are all functions that have to do with looking things up. Look at that, choose and areas, and just all types of things. But I'm going down to VLookUp. And you'll notice there's XLookUp. We talked about that earlier. We'll be coming back for that one. VLookUp. So as I look at this helpful, I love this dialog box. There's 3 required arguments: the lookup value, the table array, the column index. Now it tells me each time I click in one, it tells me what that particular argument needs. It also gives me an overview of the function itself. Looks for a value in the leftmost column of a table and then returns a value in the same row from a column that you specify. So here I've clicked in lookup value, and they want me to type AD10. Now again, I don't need to collapse and expand, just come over here. AD10 is that percentage. So I clicked in the cell and it appears in my lookup value. To the side, it's displaying the actual value in that cell. It's not 84%. 84% is the same as 0.84, but anytime we do division, that can mean that there's a lot of extra numbers, so it has all of those numbers. Now I'm going to click in table array. For my table array, it needs that GradeScale table from the other worksheet. I could, at this point, go ahead and click on the different worksheet, and I could go ahead and select that range of cells that is in GradeScale. But I've already made that very convenient for myself. I planned ahead, and so I'm just going to type GradeScale. Do you see how I haven't even gone to the next value, and it's already filled it in? And it's even showing me a 0 for F, 0.6 for D, 0.7 for C. So I can already see this is correct. In the column index, and by the way, I forgot to read these to you, but go ahead, take a moment. Each time you click on one of these, oh, look at that, it changed. I did not mean for that to happen, but let me say this to you. It changed what we are viewing. Do not lose track of the fact that you are not working on this spreadsheet. You're back. I just clicked on column index number. The formula is looking. It doesn't mean you're not changing. Your formula is going to go into cell AE10 on the scores spreadsheet. But that was kind of a cool thing where it's just switching up on us, right? The column index is the column number in the table array. Well, it was the second column. Now, the instructions only gave us 3 arguments. The 4th argument, it says, is not required. It's optional because it's not bold. But what is the consequence of that? So with this range lookup, if I leave this blank, in other words, I omit this value, or if I put the true value, it will find the closest match. In other words, Justin Abernathy's grade is 84%. That's not exactly an 80. It's not exactly a 94. It's closest to, okay, let's look at our table again. This is sorted in ascending order. So it comes through here with an 84, and it says, well, can I make this a 60? Keep going. Can I make it a 70? Keep going. Well, I can make it an 80. It's not exactly 84, but is would it match a 90? Oh, no. 90 is too much because it's in ascending order. So back up to an 80%. It's got to be sorted in this order. So now, when I look at this range, this makes a little bit more sense. If I put in true or if I leave this empty, if it's omitted, it'll find the closest match. If I had to have an exact match, like a part number, I would write false in there. But they told us don't put anything, so I'm just going to click OK. Look at that. So now I'm going to select that cell, and they tell us to copy it to all the others. I don't have to write a whole bunch of if-then statements, and I don't have to manually type these. Now, I would want to double check and look through these to make sure that they're accurate. These are student grades, but you get how this works. I don't have to look at every single grade. I'm not going to make a mistake and accidentally type an F when it should have been a B. So this is very, very helpful. Let's save that. Let's go back to these instructions. Did we do all this? We did the VLookUp, GradeScale, column 2. It says in case you do not want to specify an exact match, as the percentage grades do not match the GradeScale percentage exactly, an approximate match will be returned for the correct letter grade. And we saw because it's ascending. So it met the criteria for 80%, but in that ascending order, it could not reach the criteria for 90. So it went to the highest level it could, and then it said, nope, I can't do 90, so it backed up to 80%. So we saw that. We said we use fill down for all students to copy that, and it was okay. Now they have a note for us. If your formula does not work and returns an error such as name, see that hashtag, that # name, and then the question mark. Hashtag by itself, this, which is this like number sign, right? It does not necessarily mean an error, because you can get a bunch of hashtags if the number value in a cell it's not wide enough to display the whole number. So don't just look at that hashtag and say, oh, it's an error. It needs a word after that. So if it says name, what is it talking about? It says then one of your named ranges may be incorrect. Maybe you didn't spell it correctly. To check your name ranges, you know that to go to that name manager. So we're good there. Continuing right along, XLookUp, a newer function. And now that you've seen VLookUp and you understand its limitations, the value you're looking up must be in the first column. It must be sorted in ascending order. Well, let's just look at XLookUp and see. Is this better? Is this different? Maybe we want to use this one. It says use the XLookUp function to find scores for the Excel quiz. First, create 2 named ranges to use in the formula. So we're going to create the named ranges. Let me move this out of the way. And have we saved this? Let's make sure we save this. We're on the scores worksheet. Select cells B10 through B26. So I'm going to scroll down a little bit so you can see this more easily. B10 through B26. And we're going to name this. So I'm just coming up here to my name box. I click to type last names written in camel case. Press the enter key. Then I'm going to select W10 through W26. Now this is just that Excel quiz. And again, I'm going to come up to my name box. I'm going to click to type Excel quiz, enter. Save that. And look at all of our named ranges that we're starting to get. Press my escape key. Let's go back to our instructions. This looks good. And so let's get into step 19. This is where we're really going to use that XLookUp function. So let's just look at this. It says we're going to start out in cell A29. On the Formulas tab, we're going to again go to Lookup and Reference, and we're going to select XLookUp. It says click cell B29 to enter it. So this is the value we're searching for. This cell contains the student's last name, and then it says type last names in the lookup array. So whatever we type into cell B29, it's going to look for that value in the last names column. Remember, that's our named ranges. And then what do we want it to return? We want it to return something. Let me move these instructions out of the way. We want it to return something way over here in column W. So you see the flexibility that XLOOKUP offers. So let's do that. We are going to cell A29. So that's down here. Let me scroll this up so that you can see. Come up a little bit more. So in cell A29, I have the students' last names already here, and I'm going to click to enter that formula so that I can see very quickly their Excel quiz scores. Maybe I print just this part of the Excel spreadsheet and bring it to class so that I can call out grades or something to that effect. Anyway, I'm going to start with going to the Formulas tab. We're in Lookup and Reference, and all the way to the bottom, XLOOKUP. Love this pop-up dialog box. What value? It says, what value would you like me to look up? Well, we're looking up whatever is in the next column over, B29. That's where we have all of our last names entered. And it's already found, Abernathy. We'll click in Lookup Array. Well, where do you want me to find this last name? Now, yes, I have them here, but I want you to find it up where the table is. I want you to find it in that last names range, right, where it's got all of them. What do you want me to return? I want you to return from the Excel quiz whatever is in the same row. So you see it's listing just those values. They're not sorted. Well, they didn't tell us anything to do with these. Folks, this is a good time to point out, if you are trying to do something more advanced, there is a link down here, help on this function. Great context-sensitive help that you can get. Also, these are things that are widely used in business. Many people need to know these. You'll find great YouTube videos that you can get more in depth on these things. Right now, let's follow our instructions and let's click OK. Well, let's double check. We've got to make sure that we did that correctly. Here's Justin Abernathy. I'm just going to select the row so that we can easily see. And if I come all the way across here to column W, that value was 10. So I think my formula is correct. And I can easily read that. Doesn't that just make sense because of the named ranges that we use? We know that named ranges are absolute values. So I'm going to put my mouse over that fill handle and double click. And now I have those quiz scores for each person. I think it's worth double checking. Maybe I look at this last person, Ramig. And let me go over, it was column W. Yep, that person should have a 10, and they do. So, as I check here, B37, yep, right? So I can just kind of spot check and make sure my formulas are accurate. There you go. Wonderful. Save. Let's go back to our instructions. Look how quickly we're moving through this. Very good. On to step 20, and this is our last step before we wrap this up and find out how we did. And this is an important step. Auditing. Before closing the project, check your workbook for errors. On the Formulas tab in the Formula Auditing group, we're going to use something called error checking. It says if errors are found, and you might have errors, use the error checking skills that you learned in the chapter to find and fix the errors. When Excel displays a message that the error check is complete, click OK. So let's move this out of the way. We're on the Formulas tab, and we're in the Auditing group, and we're going to use error checking. So see this little button? This is a two-part button. I'm just going to click squarely on that button. And yay, I feel good about this. It says the error check is complete for the entire sheet. Not the book, but the sheet. So if you have multiple sheets, you may want to check. if I click the little drop down arrow, look at some options that I have. I can trace the error, and there's more steps. So a circular reference just simply means that you are adding the answer to the answer to the answer to the answer, so it can never get to the end, or you may be multiplying or something like that, but it can never get to the end because you've included the answer into the calculation of the answer. And if that doesn't make sense, that's the problem, right? Because you're adding the answer to the answer to the answer. Now, some of the tools that you also learned earlier, if you had trouble, for example, with the if function, trace precedence. That's a good one. I love these arrows. I wanted to mention these to you because this says precedence, what comes before? And sometimes you'll find an error much earlier affects this. I like this because if you are going to email this to a colleague, you could say, see how this goes to this, and these arrows will display when they open the spreadsheet. I can take those away. Excuse me, I could remove arrows. And I could keep adding to it, but it gets confusing. I could trace dependence. See? It says, what does this cell factor into? Well, it is part of our sum. Now, we know that doesn't make sense, but it may be good to tell somebody, did you realize you were adding this into the total points? Well, now we know. There's a down arrow. So these were some of the skills that you learned earlier, and you may need them to troubleshoot your formula. But okay, our error checking worked out very well, so we're good there. Ready to save and upload? What do we have to do? We have to close that workbook. So everything looks good. I think I'm satisfied with that, so let's close it. I hope I did not make any mistakes. I'm going to click on this web page and Control Home to get to the top. I'm going to move this over a little bit. Actually, I need to minimize so I can open my Excel 3 folder and slide this over to the side. I'm resizing that a little bit so that when I pop this window back open, I can just simply drag, and this way I know I've got the correct file, and drop. Are we ready to submit? Okay. Let's see if I made an error. Folks, this was a long one, so look at that 100%. Look at that. You got to do the dance. Got to do the dance. Look at that 100%. Wonderful. If you did not make 100%, you made some little mistake along the way, go back at each step, compare your screen to mine, look for mistakes, fix the file, upload again. Thank you, folks. I appreciate your time, and I hope you're learning a lot as we go through this together.